we all want to succeed, right? And sometimes we want to succeed so much to our detriment. We got to get this up and running. I cannot let my brand fail. Sometimes you forget about yourself. As a nurse practitioner, I see people that have high stress. Capital One was the one that did a survey. 42% of small business owners previously experienced burnout, and 24% had current burnout. And what this was attributed to was their lack of self-care. They're just so focused on the prize. They wear many hats. They want success for their brand that they kind of let those things go. What are you doing for you? What is your sleep hygiene like? What is your diet like?
Sleep hygiene, what's that mean?
So it just means that when we are going to go to bed, sometimes we're on our computers. 5-10 minutes later, we're going to lay down for bed. Well, the blue lights, there's the sensory that hits your brain a certain way that is still turned on, doesn't allow you to shut down. The recommendation is you power down anything that has to do with a screen, like an hour before. Yeah, reading is good, but pick up an actual book because your brain is still turned on and you need to power that down. As a small business owner, you're trying to manage a bunch of things after hours. You may be working late into the night. If you're not sleeping an average of like 7 to 8 hours or even 6 to 8, right? That's going to affect your health.
Welcome to Mission Control. At Peralta Design, we launch brands. But for now, let's launch right into this episode.
3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Mission Control. This is your host, Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design. And we launch brands, and we have a health edition this morning, corporate wellness. But first of all, let me just announce we have an exclusive guest with us today. We have the original Marty Bird. Marty Bird, welcome to the show. Marta Alejandro-Bird, she is a nurse practitioner, adult gerontology, primary care. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yes, it's so good to have you here. And of course, we've got Jorge,
who loves to write Codio, and it's not my first rodeo.
Wait a minute.
Y'all gotta keep up. All right, we're gonna start grading your intros. All right,
he has a new one every
we gotta
show.
Raise the bar. All right.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Kevin's like, I'm just gonna ship that C every single day.
Yeah, normally, this is like our morning cup of Joe edition because it's a Monday morning.
I kind of like this.
Yeah,
I'm digging it.
We're just starting a week, in a different way.
So fired up.
Yeah, man. But we're all lamenting a bit. But we have our heads held up high for our New York Knicks. They battled. It was like the Battle of Normandy. No disrespect to those real soldiers, but
no, they went the distance though.
They did,
and I mean, they gave us hope.
Yeah, they did,
which is what kills you, but still,
they made it. They made it as far as they could. They gave it their all. Literally, the guys were out there hobbling, strapped, and patched, and battle scarred
with popsicle sticks and glue. Yeah,
I liked your comment about. How are they going to advertise Game 7 during Game 6?
Yeah, I have my conspiracy theories there.
Like, wait a second.
It's Game 6. It was like first half commercial did not say if necessary.
Right, I was going to say, normally they put that in somewhere.
It just said, this is what time it is. Don't miss it. So now you're like, am I watching the WWE here? What's going on? How much of this is already planned? But they did their best. It was tough to watch. We look forward to next season. As much as I dislike the Celtics, they are a New England team, so I guess there are going to be some folks. But it's kind of like sacrilegious if you're a Knicks fan.
Can't do it.
Get behind the Knicks.
I'm not going to.
We don't like the Pacers either, so
right. I'm gonna not. It's tough. I'm gonna root for the Pacers to lose, but not for the Celtics to win. And then I got the Timberwolves after that because I loved KG back in the day.
Yeah, KG. So and last week I had an opportunity to present a different type of brand new workshop at Greenwich Library. I had done one for SCORE, and shout out to SCORE and shout out to Greenwich Library. They found value in the workshop enough to invite me back to teach a course on specifically logo design. So libraries, I don't know if you guys are aware, they've just come a long way as far as trying to remain relevant. We were having that discussion, but they have so many resources. So at the Greenwich Library in particular, they've got a $10,000, 3D printer all you need is a library card, and you can go in there and utilize it. And they buy all the supplies, and everything.
It's
insane.
absolutely amazing, and something that I think we don't take advantage of enough.
Yeah.
We get so used to the sum of all human knowledge in your pocket,
Yeah.
is what we like to say, and yet we have all these amazing resources.
Yeah.
3D printer, I've been wanting to get one of those for forever. And the
Yeah.
fact that you could kind of get your, dip your toe in the water just at the library for free.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
I also realized like the effect of like when you see a Barnes and Noble and you want to go inside and walk, it's a library.
Yeah.
And except there you have to pay for it.
Right, exactly. So why are we not using our libraries more?
I walked in and it's just like the biggest Barnes and Noble you've ever seen, and you can take out the books for free.
Right,
and
and not just books, movies.
Right.
Like, my youngest loves it. I loved it growing up, and I feel like we need to. Yeah, we can't
It's
pay
cool.
for our
It's a
library
great
anymore.
destination. I mean, they have a theater, auditorium. They have a laser engraver, and the laser engraver has people in there, engraving their names and their family logos. So folks are starting to try to create their own logos, which is what prompted this workshop, is because they're doing like wine glasses and things and Yeti mugs and the logos, quote unquote, that they're creating on their own just aren't translating well to the laser engraver. So I was there last Thursday, presenting, and it went well. They have an innovation lab inside the library, and folks were there, and I got to go around and give feedback on their logos, present best practices for logos.
What were they using for software?
A lot of them were using Canva.
Okay.
And a lot of them were using AI. Right. There was a gentleman there who was using AI, and his company was called Curb Grub. Like kind of like Grubhub or Uber Eats or something like that. He was kind of going for that, and I was like, "What's your idea?" And he was like, "Well, the idea is that this app is going to be like a radar and tell you where all the food trucks are." So not horrible, You could see it was kind of like a Waze, but like to tell you where like a sonar or radar to kind of tell you where the food trucks are, and because he used AI, curb was spelled with 2 R's. And it was like curb RRB, CURRB, and then grub or whatever it was, but then his company name on his business card just had 1 R, and it was like, like he's using the AI, but the AI created like a food truck icon that had so many details in it, and so part of this is simplifying your logos.
Because it's not going to reproduce at smaller scale when you engrave. Right.
I had to give him extreme examples, like crumble cookie example. It's super simple, like very, very, very basic.
Memorable though.
Memorable, exactly. So just kind of doing that, and in the spirit of education, Jorge, I wanted to pass you the baton because we're doing a web-based educational segment.
Just a little segment for our small business owners, the entrepreneurs period. Let's say you don't have the business yet, much like this gentleman who's getting the Curb Grub business going. You need to make sure that you secure your domain. It's one of the most important things. It needs to be much like the logo itself. We wanted to make it as short, simple, and memorable as possible. You don't want to have Curb Grub foodtruckradar.com because that's going to, while it's great for keywords.
Right, I was going to say, that would be what you type into your Google.
All right, exactly. You do have, it becomes incredibly long, and no one's going to type all of that in. So as short and sweet as you can possibly get it, but the domain is really the first thing. So if you think about it, the domain is kind of like the registration for your car, right? You have to pay for it, and you have to renew it every so often. So you need to make sure that continues, that you have that. And one of the key things that so many people forget, and we deal with this all the time with different business owners, is when you purchase that, you need to be aware of when the expiration date is. Mark that down somewhere, make a reminder in your phone, tell Siri, because if you forget and that domain expires, you could potentially lose all of that work that you've done with that domain. And we've had to help people because once it expires, there are literally companies who that's what they do. They go out and grab expired domains for pennies on the dollar, and then they'll go and hold it hostage for however many thousands.
Yeah, I remember Doctor, they wanted $10,000 for it.
Exactly.
They're like ransom.
Exactly. And so many people, let's say you bought your domain in, in the early 2000s, the late 90s, and you set it to renew for X amount of time, and then that card expires.
Right.
You don't even know whose card it was. Or let's say you had, we're going to have Jimmy from IT buy it for us, right? Cool. And then Jimmy bought it, and he hasn't been at the company for 7 years, and nobody knows who owns this domain, and things get away from you really easily.
Very difficult to transfer ownership.
Exactly. So you want to make sure that, we recommend that you own your intellectual property at all possible junctures. You don't want to make it so that way you have another company you could have another company manage it, but you want to own it. Whoever's name is on it should be either yourself as the owner or somebody at your company who's kind of a principal, something you can always get into. The other thing is just the difference between the domain name is one thing, right? Whatever your curbgrub.com is. Giving this gentleman a bunch of free plugs today. I know. But also the hosting. So wherever your website's going to live. So you're also kind of telling the internet, okay, when you type in that curbgrub.com, where is it going? Where are we pointing it to? And you want to make sure you have quality hosting for whatever it is that you're doing. And that's an important thing for people to understand too, is it's very much you get what you pay for, right? If you get the economy super value package, it's like $3 a month. That is exactly the level of quality you're going to get. It will be hosting. Will it be fast? Will it have better security features? Will it give you things like automated backups or include your SSL or security? Will you have? Will it be, a good experience for your customers? Is something you have to think of. You want to think about what that investment is. It's kind of like if you were, if you get that economy car, you're driving that 1998 Mazda. That's when you roll up and the other person's shows up in the Porsche. Well, okay, there's going to be different experiences.
Right, exactly.
So you want to think about those things. So just important to know, not all hosting is created equal. So again, based on what your needs are, and you can always scale that too. You don't have to go and buy the Porsche day one, but you probably want to start with something a little bit more. Just get the Toyota to start, and and then you can ramp it up from there.
Right.
When you talk about the expiration date, is there like you can select like you want to do it for a year, or is it a standard that most people do?
That's a great question. So by the default, it is a year. They will try to normally sell you at least 2 or more at a little bit of a price break. If you're gonna be in this bit, if you're not sure, I recommend doing 1 to 2 years. If you're already an existing business owner or you're committed for the long haul, then buy the 5+ year renewal. But make sure you set a reminder literally somewhere that you will check in 5 or 7 years time. Set it a month beforehand, and so you can go in and check: does that card need to be renewed? Is that billing method still on file or not? And just make sure you know when it's going to renew. Renew early if you can. Once you're getting to the end of that, the end of that basically your license period, if you will. Because if you lose it, you could lose it forever. It could cost you that much more.
Great segment on all things important for the business owner, the small business owner, someone just starting out. But when we come back, we're going to learn all about the importance of health and self-care for the small business owner, as well as the story behind the original Marty Bird.
If you've got an innovation that you want to bring to the world, the first step is making sure you've got a great domain name. Visit shop.spacehost.pro to grab your domain name today and begin your new venture and your new business. Shop.spacehost.pro.
So you are a nurse practitioner, adult gerontology, primary care from Bridgeport, from the hood. And now you're just killing the game. Recently completed some work at Duke, right?
Yeah.
So tell us your story.
Wow. Okay. So I know we were talking earlier about what makes people go to healthcare, and then I'll have a little funny story a little later on in this segment. But I guess I always liked helping people. If somebody was hurt or something was going down, anybody got cut, I had to be there. I wanted to see what's going on. I figure out how to patch things up.
So you weren't afraid of blood?
No, I was curious. I really was. But the good thing is, so I grew up in Bridgeport, and we were in the Greens for a long time, and then eventually ended up in PT before I left to college. But when we were in elementary school or more middle school, they would talk about what is your potential career path, right? Because what they wanted to do was set up your high school academics to satisfy what the colleges were looking for. So if you wanted to go into nursing, you had to be strong in your math skills. You had to be exceptionally strong in your science skills, right? And so every time I took the test at the library, it always said healthcare, healthcare, healthcare. And in that regard, I was really happy because I already knew 7th grade, it was just an exercise to, what do you have to do? Because you had to do it. But I already knew. So I wanted to go to nursing school. And so once we got through junior year, I actually was a part of the Upward Bound program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah.
It's a great program.
It is a wonderful program. And we used to do 6 weeks at Fairfield University, lived on campus, and I loved it. But it was funny because when it came to attending school, Fairfield U was the last thing on my radar. Because I figured, I've been there so much. I don't really want to, I don't know if I really want to go there.
So I wanted going away to school at that point.
Yeah, everybody's talking about going away, and Fairfield U is over the hill, really, right? Past Black Rock. So I was telling Erica, right, his sister-in-law, right? Your sister-in-law. We were talking, she went to Rutgers, and so did Brittany, right? So I wanted to go to Rutgers. I wanted to go away and go to nursing school. And I remember Mr. Gaskins saying to me, they have a great program. And that was the first time somebody said to me, you want to look at not only, that you get the degree, but what is the reputation of that program? Because that's going to set you up. And after some counseling and just looking at it and doing my own research, then I thought, you know what? Yeah, this is where I want to be. So I literally ripped up my Rutgers and applied early decision to Fairfield. And I got in, and it was probably the best experience, not without its, rocky roads, but was the best thing for me.
And, granted the importance of programs like Upward Bound, but you mentioned the Greens and PT. For those that are unfamiliar, both housing projects, urban, the hood of Bridgeport. What do you think was it that gave you that way out? Because a lot of our young people don't make it out of there, and here you are deciding what college to go to.
I think it was a struggle, right? Because a lot of us were from a single parent, and their thing was we're trying to provide food, shelter, you go to school, that's your job. No one really sat with us to learn. So that was part of it. But then around the time when, in the 80s, there was a lot of violence. And I used to love to play basketball. Wasn't very good at it, but I loved it. And
just like Kevin, cool.
Go play pickup basketball and, but my biggest concern was I didn't want to be a statistic. There was a lot of drive-bys, and it was scary. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted something different. I had one of my friends, before we moved back to the projects, we lived on Hancock Avenue and, the 3 family homes. And I used to talk over the driveway to my friend, and they eventually moved, and I was sad, and they moved to West Haven. They bought their own house. And I thought, oh, my gosh, when I went to visit, this is amazing. Like, this is another part of society. This is beyond the projects. And that's when I really started thinking, this is nice. You can go for a walk. There's trees. There's lots of grass. There's trails. And there wasn't this fear of violence. Like, when you grow up in the inner city, you're like looking over your shoulder.
Your head's on a swivel.
It is. Yeah. It is. And years later, when I would go to the Navy and we would be walking, sometimes my friends are like, what are you looking for? And I'm just like, nothing. It's just habit. But, you want to get a bearing of your surroundings. Yeah. So I think for me, the journey was you start looking at your environment and you start thinking there's got to be something more. One of the things that I went to Bassick High School, and one of the things that they did was they would have these guest speakers come in. And you want to talk about some of those stories really just like grabbing you from the beginning. To this day, I remember this one lady say, she gets up there very polished, and the first thing she says is, when I was 16 or something like that, my mother was murdered.
Whoa.
And I was just like, wow.
Well, that's how you start a speech.
I tell you what, she had me.
Oh, yeah.
But her thing was, these were obstacles, right? These were my challenges. These were my childhood traumas. And yet, this is what I'm doing today. A very successful businesswoman. And I remember the girl sitting next to me saying, well, that's a tough act to follow when the third person came up. But by then, I was riveted. And her story was just one of saying, listen, just because this is where you begin does not mean that this is where you end. Aspire to something more. And so I think that was one of those things that sat with me in high school. And then I just kept going from there. I wanted more. I just wanted more. And I later on, I would find out that I came from a family of educators at the college level, at the high school level, elementary. And I thought, where were all these people when I needed it, you know? So, and I had good counsel, you know, the guidance counselors, Mr. Joins, everybody
Shout out to
in
Mr.
Bridgeport.
Joins.
Keith Joins.
Lord rest his soul.
Yeah.
He's
He's a
one of my
beast.
favorite. So my mom was a guidance counselor at Bassick.
Oh, really?
And Mr. Joins was one of my favorite people. Like literally somebody who just emanates warmth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he was such a great guy, and I have so many good memories. So like, it's amazing sometimes thinking about how, you know, just having someone to provide some guidance in your life can just change your whole trajectory. So
And part of it is looks like somebody who looks like you,
Yeah.
too.
Oh, true.
You know, because I didn't have that.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
speaking of Fairfield U must have been culture shock to be there, like living on campus
Oh, yeah.
after coming from Bridgeport.
It is. And, you know, it's interesting because Tabitha Brickhouse Fort, Dr. Fort, she,
Shout out to Guy Fort and Tabitha Fort.
you know.
Everything's all the dots are connecting.
Yeah.
Small world.
The first person I sought out was her. And she lived across campus, and I couldn't wait for her to get on campus because that was my person. She was actually my roommate in Upward Bound, too. So you do kind of find your group because, you know, there were some struggles.
Yeah.
You know, there was this once upon a time, and obviously not, I love that school. That school's been amazing and continues to be, you know, but sometimes the sense was, oh, you're from Bridgeport. Strike one, you know, Puerto Rican, you know, and so you feel like the biggest challenge was, do I belong here? So for me,
Like
I think,
imposter syndrome.
yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, I had the academics, you know, but then it was like, you're here. Now, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to blend? Because, you know, for me, it was just like fun all the time and very easygoing. But that was a little bit of a challenge, you know. And that was my first year of just kind of learning the environment, learning the culture,
Right.
you know. But I had a good team. You know, I had Tabby, I had Shauna. Shauna Wilkerson is an attorney. She was a couple years ahead of us in the basketball team, and she's doing phenomenally. So I had a good team that embraced me. And I think if there's one theme about my growth, you know, professionally, personally, is having a good team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that probably is a good segue into the military. So you're at Fairfield U, you're studying nursing. When do you make that transition or decision that Navy going into the Navy as an officer is the right move?
So it's all about curiosity, right? I've always looked for more. And I went to the nursing school one day, and they had a nurse corps officer recruiting. It was probably my junior year. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I go and I talk to her, and her name was Nancy, Lieutenant Nancy Lancy. And she was telling me all about it, and I was really intrigued, like, oh, I can go here, I can go there, because back then I wanted to be an ER nurse. And she said, oh, yeah, you can do that. You can work on the hospital ship. You know, we have trauma. So I thought, oh, this would be great. Oh, well, come back another time, we'll have lunch. And I remember somebody saying, why are you talking to them? You already have, you know, you're almost graduating. Because, you know, the idea is sometimes when you join, or you still, right, you join the military, they'll pay for your school, and then you give them 4 years back. That wasn't my story. I was closer to graduation. And then she was married, Lieutenant Lancy was married to a pilot. So she invites me to come to Florida to check out the Blue Angels, who are like,
whoa,
yeah. There's a picture.
Those guys fly in formation and do all these amazing moves.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
And we watched them. They came, they talked to us, and then they did this walking formation to their planes. and they just took off. And I was kind of like, oh, this is awesome. Sign me up.
She knew what she was doing the whole time. She was like, I know what to do. Taking her down here, and then she's going to sign on the line.
And I learned what G's were, because then another time I did a ride in a 2-seater, and I was the goose. Let me tell you what, I never realized how much G-forces. Oh man.
Whoa.
Yeah. It was great. I was sold.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? This is pretty awesome that I get to be exposed to all of these things. I get to see the world, you know, I get to travel. And so I signed up. I actually, when I graduated, I passed my boards, and I went and with 2 of my friends from college and moved to Baltimore. So I worked there in a step-down trauma. And then after that, my friends wanted to do travel nursing, and I said, I'm going to join the Navy. I'll do the ultimate travel nursing job, you know. But that took me to Bethesda, Maryland. And during that time, I would serve on the hospital ship. They say they frock you to, I was a lieutenant junior grade, and I got pinned for a full lieutenant 2 miles outside of Port-au-Prince back when stuff was going on.
Yeah.
And we were managing like the traumas that came in. So by then I had 3 years in the Navy, and I was in the ICU.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're taking now all of that experience and kind of walk us through what you're seeing, you know, in your daily practice, but what you're seeing as maybe lacking in the business world, or some ways that business owners, professionals can do a better job of managing their health.
So I think one of the biggest things is we all want to succeed, right? And sometimes we want to succeed so much to our detriment. We're very focused on, we got to get this up and running. I need to be there to provide for, you know, my employees. Where's my brand going? I cannot let my brand fail. That sometimes you forget about yourself. And, you know, in work now as a nurse practitioner, I see people that have high stress. And my subspecialty of that is gastroenterology. So a lot of these things, you know, with significant reflux issues, GI issues, is related to stress. But a lot of what you don't get to talk about is, what are you doing for you? What is your sleep hygiene like? What is your diet like?
Sleep hygiene, what's that mean?
So it just means that, you know, when we are going to go to bed, sometimes we're on our computers and we're looking up, and then 5-10 minutes later, we're going to lay down for bed. Well, the blue lights, you know, there's the sensory that hits your brain a certain way that is still turned on, doesn't allow you to shut down. So typically the recommendation is you power down like an hour before anything that has to do with a screen. So I'm a fan of the old fashioned turn the page book. I don't like the
Kindle.
The Kindles. It's not my thing. But then when you read about sleep hygiene, that's one of those things that, yeah, reading is good, but pick up an actual book, because your brain is still turned on and you need to power that down. And so, you know, if you're not sleeping, you know, an average of like 7 to 8 hours, or even 6 to 8, right? That's going to affect your health. If you're, you know, as a small business owner, you're trying to manage a bunch of things after hours, you know, you may be working late into the night. I was guilty of that too when when I graduated, I started working as a nurse practitioner during COVID. And so there was a steep learning curve for this particular specialty, but also just trying to manage, you know, trying to make my brand, right? This practitioner, she's a hard worker, she's very informed, you know, I want to present that. I would probably work 14, 16 hours a day. I'd go home after 10 hours a day, and then I'm reading all these different articles, and I'm on a computer.
Yeah, you go hard. You go hard in the paint.
And you could, you know, I wasn't sleeping well, and I started being that person sitting across from me. And so when I was, you know, preparing for today, I was just kind of looking at, you know, corporate care, and I had some interesting statistics. Forbes magazine in 2022 did a 1,200 sampling of small business owners. And interestingly enough, Capital One was the one that did a survey. 42% of small business owners had previously experienced burnout, and 24% had current burnout. And what this was attributed to was their lack of self-care. They're just so focused on the prize. They wear many hats. they want success for their brand, that they kind of let those things go. And so that's interesting to me. I think, when I have people come to me, one of the first things I ask them is, what's the stress like? How's your appetite? How are you eating? And then I'll say, okay, give me a quick 24-hour recap. What'd you have for breakfast? What'd you have for lunch? And they're like, what'd you have for dinner? Devoid of nutrients that are necessary for them to maintain their health. So, and then by extension, right, if you don't have a good program for yourself, how can you set the example for your employees, right? So if you go back to like parenthood, right, it's not do as I say, not as I do. It's they're learning because they're watching you, your children. And so, my daughter would say, "You're giving me this, it's green." I'm saying, well, it's not cyanide, it's spinach.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. You as for example, you have a personal trainer, you golf. These are things that you do for you that are really important and necessary. And so your staff is seeing that, okay, these are things that are important to him. And maybe this is why he's successful, right? Because some of your team will eventually want to go on to do their own years from now, start their own business. And you take examples of what makes you want to be your best. I say that because there is, when I was in my second year at Duke, there was a program called Global Medicine Exploring Honduras. And so what we did was we learned all about the culture and everything. And I kind of was like, I don't know if I want to go, but we had this amazing.
This was that mission you did, right? You did.
Yeah.
You go on a mission to Honduras.
Yeah, but the reason for that was at first I was on the fence, but then I found out that there was this one professor who was just phenomenal. Like her lectures, I just loved her. And I remember saying, I want to be like her. I admire that type of person. And when I found out she was going on that trip, then I submitted my essay and I was selected. And the way the universe would work, she ended up being my roommate and she continues to be a mentor.
Wow.
And so, just by learning, you don't realize sometimes that the things that you do, you have people watching and they're going to take from you some of the good, some of the bad, right? But that's what's going to help formulate their experience and move forward.
Absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about something more specific, your area, because I know that the stress can manifest into the GI system as ulcers or present itself as all these other things, but you have a particular interest in raising awareness on colon cancer. Right.
So I'm a gastroenterology nurse practitioner. It's what I've done in the last 3 years. And there's one thing called irritable bowel syndrome that a lot of people are familiar with. And you pretty much manage that symptomatically once you've excluded any type of organic issues. But one of the things that triggers some of these things is stress, lack of sleep, appetite, but more importantly, diet. So if you're devoid of like nutrients, fiber, it's gonna affect you. One of the things that is very important to me, as you said, is colon cancer screening. So I'm from Bridgeport. We didn't talk about our health issues or anything, and no, nobody talked about it. And whoever wants to talk about colon cancer. So it's funny because recently I had a client say to me, "Whoever aspires to want to talk about bowel habits all day." And I just said, well, you could say the same thing about gynecology.
Yeah.
But it's just an interest because the way I see it, we were talking about the Porsche earlier. Mm-hmm. I tell my patients, if you have a Porsche, are you going to put regular unleaded fuel in that car? And if you do, you're not going to like that performance, right? You need premium grade. And this is what you want to do is pay attention to your diet, right? Because one of the other articles, I'm a big fan of this. I've gotten into Dr. Huberman. He's out of Stanford. And they talk about processed foods and how it affects you. And one of the big things is like sugars, high sugars. But anyway, why do I bring these up is because a persistent inflammatory response can contribute to, issues down the road in the colon. So going back to colon cancer, right? When you think of like Chadwick Boseman is the one that we all know. But one of the things I was surprised to hear was about Daryl Strawberry. I believe he was 35 years old when he was diagnosed. And when I went into nursing, I wanted to be able to cater to, my community, right? Because when you're a single parent household, your insurance may not be the best. So you go to these community clinics and you may not be getting
the best of care.
Right. Or, I like to think that it's getting better. It's evolving because people that are doing that type of work really want to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And so when you're trying to make that difference, right, you want to assess the situation and what's statistically happening. We're seeing that people in the African-American communities, Native Americans, Latinos, they're having issues with higher and earlier incidence of colon cancer. And so getting those screenings done. Because of these, the demographics, right? It used to be that you had to get your first screening colonoscopy at 50 years of age. Now it's 45. And then, as we were saying earlier, right, if you have a family member, a first degree, who has colon cancer early, so if your mom had colon cancer at 45, you better believe that her offspring are going to be evaluated at 35 years of age. And the thing is, it's one of these things that can save your lives because colon cancer starts off like a little sprout. I tell people polyps, right? Yeah. That's what it is. That can get out of control. And polyps can look like a little baseball mound. It can look like a little bush. It can look like a little tree. And you want to get those out. Sometimes people say, well, I had the Cologuard done. And I said, well, does your family or do you have colon polyps? And they're like, yeah. I said, well, then that's not the appropriate one for you. With 99% accuracy, the gold standard is to have that colonoscopy done, And so, people have different reasons why they're afraid of it. But I tell them, you can't feel a polyp. But if it's one that gets out of control, and you don't have it checked until you're having symptoms, you may get yourself into a position where you're either going to lose your colon or you're going to lose your life because things just get out of control. And so, that's one of those things that as a small business owner, right, is making sure that you're setting the example, right, for just self-care, right? And that includes by extension the making sure you're having your screenings done all the time, right? Annual physical, getting your heart checked, getting your cholesterol checked, and actually talking to your families about, hey, is anybody die about anything? I think I should know because that is really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's important to say, especially in our communities, because oftentimes we'll just hear like, he died, or he had something in his stomach, or, he liked his rum, or they don't have a specific, like cause of death.
Right.
It's just something very vague, and it's important to kind of pry a little bit and get a little bit more detail so that you can learn. A lot of us don't know our family history,
right? Our
family medical history, anyway. But yeah, that's a great point.
And then we can, we take it home. So one of the other things about doing self-care and employees learning that is that they kind of have that opens a conversation at home, because for providers, right, what are you taught? About 90% of your diagnosis is based on your history. And so if you don't have a very good history, you're not going to know. So, one of the things I talk to with a couple of my other friends who have their businesses that are up and running is I say to them, smaller businesses, right, it's hard to have a full-time employee health provider, right? So you get someone that, is vetted, right, or a healthcare provider or a nurse. I think in the state of Connecticut, nurses can be like wellness coaches, but if you have a provider, you come in like once a year or so, you meet with each staff. That is a benefit of their employment, and you go over the history, and they can be a partner with your primary care to make sure that these things are getting done so that your team can be healthy and continue to progress together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important.
I'm glad you also mentioned just the openness and the importance of history. I think a lot of people get caught up, and I experienced this when my dad got sick, was a lot of people think that modern medicine is like, all right, we're going to go in, we're going to scan you, we're going to figure out what's up, and you're good. And it doesn't work like that at all. It's very much, like you said, you're more like a detective where you need to get all of the evidence in order to put it all together. And if you're missing, or if you omit something, or if a part of that picture is obscured, you're not going to be able to give the treatment that's really going to help this person. So the openness of knowing, hey, here's what's going on, here's the whole history, if you're filling out the form, you're like, I don't really need to mention that. But you do.
Yeah.
Because they're not gonna. You're like, oh well, they'll know if they won't. You know what I mean? So it's such an important thing, or if they do find out, it might be too late.
Yeah, and it's a partnership, right? Gone are the days where the doctor says this is what it is, you do it. And our generation, I know my mom. Well, the doctor said it, so that's it. I tell them, I want you to be comfortable. It's a relationship. I want you to be comfortable to say to me, well, this is what I'm thinking. So I usually will end with, are you agreeable to this plan? Is this what you were expecting? Is there something you would have done different? And then sometimes you get by the way, I don't know if this is important, but, and that's usually the thing that's the most important,
right?
Of that whole 20 minutes that you had with them, or 30 minutes.
Did you want to share an anecdote or story or in your years of practice of maybe something that could have gone the wrong way had it not been caught early?
Yeah. So sometimes, when we talk to our family and friends, we tell them the bad stories. I was in the ER, I was there for 4 hours and they didn't do anything. As an individual, I think I would like people to just take the recommendation of the person that you're trusting to care for you. And I say this because I had someone who came in with significant pain, and they gave me all the history. And sometimes as you're collecting it, you have to keep them on track. But the bottom line was, I did my assessment, and based on the history, I thought something's wrong here. And I wanted them to go to the ER. And they refused because of prior experience with associates. And
what were they seeking? They just wanted like pain medicine to just...
I don't know that they wanted pain medicine. I think they just wanted the pain to go away. And I was trying to understand where this pain was coming from, why. And so I set them up for an urgent imaging study. And again, right, history, presentation, and I got a call back pretty quickly because I had said, all right, we're going to do this urgently or stat. And in between, if you're not doing well, I need you to promise me you're going to the ER. Because you don't want to medicate someone when you don't know why. And turns out that person ended up needed surgery. That saved their lives because they could have potentially gotten septic, which is like a major infection that just the body can shut down. And so in follow-up, it was a good experience because, you go with your instinct and you take the information like the history and know that, when you're focusing on this is what, and when they're asking you questions, they're really doing that detective work, right? Your provider to say, something's wrong. So sticking to my gut, I was just like, nope, something is not right here. I need you to go. I need this. And, she did, and she was ever so grateful, And so it's just really interesting to get that information. And when you have, that, your hairs are standing up or something, like something's not right, you want to pursue it. And, again, it's a partnership because I think
Trust your gut, if you will.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly, pun intended. But in this case, just the relationship between the individual and the provider is like having your best friend, because that you tell them anything you wouldn't tell anybody else with the trust that this is your private issue and it's not to be discussed unless it's discussed with another doctor that I really have this concern. You want to weigh in. But I think it's having that confidence and going in there. Like sometimes people say to me, doctors hate when I tell them. And I say, well, first of all, I'm not a doctor. Second of all, I think we want to encourage you to know, do some research, but know where you're doing your research. NIH has great sources, World Health Organization. A lot of these people weigh into the organizations, the specialties, such as the American College of Gastroenterology, that set out the guidelines for care. And so having that, not having the fear of having that honest conversation, because this can potentially save your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you share some places where folks might get more information on colon cancer screening and all that other?
So right now, I think March was the colon cancer awareness. But The American College of Gastroenterology is a big one. You don't have to be a member. They have sources there. You know, if you're really curious, you can look at the guidelines, and they give you a history as to why and what studies were done and evaluated. For self-care, you know, there's some information out there. You can search like corporate wellness. But your biggest person is going to be a primary care provider, and everyone should have a primary care provider, because I call it the quarterback, right? He looks out and he sees, all right, my wide receiver's open, that's where I'm going, you know? And so that's like, I need him to go to a gastroenterology, or I need him to go to orthopedics. So having your primary care physician. But from a colon cancer screening, there is the American College of Gastroenterology. That's, you know, my main resource. And then you can do NIH, and they have lots of information, NIH, and then the World Health Organization.
Okay, excellent. Well, Marty, thank you for being on our show. We're so proud of all the adversity you've overcome and the passion with which you carry yourself and live your life and your career and helping others. So we really, really appreciate you sharing some wisdom with us and our listeners. And thank you for being on our show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Mission Control. Until next time, this is your host, Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands.